が好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ一番好きよ
Episode 8, Escape Across the Multiverse, Part 1. Scene 1. A blinding white light slowly faded away. Ataru struggled to open his eyes. Thick clouds of dust drifted through the air, making it difficult to see. A few yards away, Shinobu coughed as she pushed chunks of broken concrete off her body. Slowly, they both looked up. The sight before them froze them in place. Tomobiki was gone. The streets had become endless mountains of rubble. Buildings stood only as blackened skeletons of scorched concrete. Massive columns of smoke climbed into a crimson sky where enormous warships, shaped like gigantic metallic cigars, drifted overhead like dark storm clouds. In the distance came the constant roar of explosions, the crack of gunfire, the wail of sirens, and the unmistakable whistle of heavy artillery. Ataru swallowed hard. Shinobu stared across the ruined city, her eyes wide with disbelief. Where? She could barely get the words out. Where are we? Before Ataru could answer, boom! A violent explosion ripped through the street only a short distance away. Chunks of asphalt blasted into the air. Run! Ataru grabbed Shinobu's hand, and the two sprinted through the shattered ruins as shell after shell crashed around them. Suddenly, a voice called out from a trench reinforced with sandbags. Over here, hurry! A young man wearing a khaki combat uniform, a military helmet, and a scarf covering his face frantically waved them over. Without stopping to think, Ataru and Shinobu jumped into the trench. Another explosion shook the ground. The young soldier slammed a heavy steel hatch shut, sealing them inside. Only then did he pull down the scarf covering his face. Ataru's eyes went wide. Magain? The young man stood there, just as frozen as Ataru. Then, after a long moment, he let out a crooked grin. Well, you're tougher than I thought. Ataru smirked. Bad weeds never die. Magain chuckled before turning toward Shinobu. And what are you doing here with him? Still trying to catch her breath, Shinobu raised a hand. It's not what you think. Ataru quickly jumped in. We have no idea what's going on. Magain shook his head. It doesn't matter. He picked up the rifle resting against the wall. Humans are humans. In this shelter, we all help each other. He led them through a long, underground tunnel. Dim emergency lamps barely lit the passageway. Dozens of young men worked in silence. Some cleaned rifles, others checked ammunition or handed out precious food rations. Among them were familiar faces. Perm, Chibi, Kakugari, and many more classmates from Tomobiki High. Every one of them wore military uniforms. Every face was stained with dust. Every expression showed exhaustion. Another explosion thundered overhead, sending dirt raining down from the ceiling. Ataru slowly looked around, completely bewildered. What's going on here? What is all this? Magain raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you're pretending you've lost your memory? He sighed. That's just like you, Ataru. At that very moment, the entire shelter fell silent. One of the soldiers called out loudly, Attention! Another shouted proudly, Our leader is about to speak! From the back of the bunker, a tall young man stepped into view. His black hair was neatly combed back. His posture was flawless. His athletic build alone commanded everyone's respect the instant he entered the room. Shinobu froze. A faint blush spread across her cheeks. The young man calmly surveyed the room before speaking. My friends? His voice was steady and full of confidence. Thanks to your courage, we've survived another day. As long as we stand together, we will never allow the invaders to destroy our hope. The entire shelter erupted into thunderous applause. Ataru frowned. And who's this show-off supposed to be? The applause came to an abrupt halt. Every eye in the bunker turned toward Ataru in horror. Magain's jaw nearly hit the floor. What's wrong with you? He hurried over and lowered his voice. That's our leader. He paused for emphasis. Shitaro Mendo. Ataru blinked. The heir to the Mendo conglomerate? Exactly. Magain nodded with unmistakable admiration. Ever since the invasion began, he's been the commander of the Japanese resistance. While Ataru struggled to make sense of everything, Mendo had already walked straight over to Shinobu. With perfect elegance, he gently took both of her hands in his. A charming smile crossed his face. There's no need to be afraid. As long as I live, I shall never allow any harm to come to a young lady as lovely as you. Shinobu stared at him, completely captivated. Thank you. A vein throbbed across Ataru's forehead. Hey! He stepped forward and yanked Shinobu away from Mendo. Mendo glared at him. What is the meaning of this insolence? Ataru folded his arms. You're nothing but a pompous show-off. Silence. The entire shelter froze. What did he just say? Mendo's expression darkened. Slowly, he drew his sword. How dare you? Ataru didn't budge. And you're an arrogant snob. Pointing the tip of his blade toward Shinobu, Mendo declared, That scoundrel is forcing you to stay with him. Have you been kidnapped? Shinobu immediately shook her head. No, he's my boyfriend. For the first time, Mendo stood completely speechless. Impossible. He looked at Ataru with utter contempt. A young woman as beautiful as she is could never fall in love with someone like you. He raised his sword. Prepare yourself. The blade came slicing down at incredible speed. Ataru reacted on pure instinct. He caught the descending blade with both hands just before it could strike him. Whoa! Hold it! The next instant, chaos erupted. Mendo charged after him, swinging his sword with all the fury of a samurai on the battlefield. Ataru bolted through the bunker, screaming at the top of his lungs. Are you crazy? Put that thing away! Shinobu raced after them, waving her arms frantically. Stop it! Both of you! The three tore through the underground shelter, weaving between startled resistance fighters and stacks of supplies. Without realizing it, they burst out of the bunker and ran far beyond the safety of the trench. Then, several crimson lights suddenly appeared across their bodies. The three of them froze. Slowly, very slowly, they looked up. An Oni patrol stood before them, their laser rifles trained directly at the trio. The soldiers wore yellow combat uniforms decorated with tiger-like stripes, heavy armor, and horned helmets. Their imposing figures left no doubt. They were seasoned warriors. Don't move. Ataru, Shinobu, and Mendo slowly raised their hands. The commander of the squad stepped forward. Without saying a word, he reached up and removed his helmet. Ataru felt his heart stop. Emerald green hair, piercing blue eyes, a powerful athletic build. Rei. But this wasn't the simple-minded Rei they knew. His expression was calm, cold, the face of a veteran who had survived countless battles. A faint smile crossed his lips. Well. He looked over the three prisoners. What do we have here? Night had fallen over Tomobiki. The city was only a shadow of what it had once been. Where supermarkets, apartment buildings, parks, and crowded streets had once stood, there were now only endless piles of shattered concrete and charred ruins. Columns of smoke continued to rise into the dark sky, while enormous Oni warships, shaped like gigantic metallic cigars, hovered silently overhead. Their massive searchlights swept across the devastated landscape like the eyes of relentless predators. Gliding beneath those floating fortresses was an Oni military transport. Inside sat three prisoners: Ataru, Shinobu, and Shutaro Mendo. Their hands were bound behind their backs as a squad of towering Oni soldiers stood guard. Nearly 7 feet tall, with emerald hair, piercing blue eyes, and powerfully built bodies, they watched every movement without saying a word. Even the proud Mendo looked small beside those giants. At last, the transport came to a stop. With a loud hydraulic hiss, the heavy doors slid open. The guards shoved the prisoners outside. Ataru slowly lifted his head. His heart skipped a beat. No, it can't be. Before them stretched a vast, perfectly leveled expanse of land. There wasn't a single trace of Tomobiki High School. In its place stood a colossal military fortress. Towering above it rested an enormous cigar-shaped mothership, surrounded by armored vehicles, blazing floodlights, and countless Oni soldiers patrolling every corner. Ataru stared in disbelief. This was our school. Shinobu could barely hold back her tears. The guards pushed them forward once again. They marched through long metallic corridors illuminated by cold blue lights. The thunderous footsteps of the Oni soldiers echoed through the halls. Suddenly, Mendo collapsed to his knees. Desperately, he clasped his hands together. Please, don't hurt me. The guards didn't even look at him. His voice began to tremble. I'm the leader of the resistance. If you let me go, I'll tell you where we hide our weapons. I'll even tell you where the other resistance leaders are. Ataru stared at him in complete disbelief. Then he let out a dry laugh. Wow. So much for the fearless leader of the resistance. He shook his head. You're nothing but a traitor. Mendo slowly lifted his head, his eyes burning with rage. Don't you dare lecture me about betrayal, you worm. He rose to his feet, every movement slow and deliberate. Out of everyone here, you're the last person who has the right to say that. Ataru frowned. What are you talking about? Mendo let out a bitter, scornful laugh. So now you're going to pretend you don't remember? He stepped closer until only a few inches separated them. Everyone knows you've been the invader's favorite pet this whole time. Ataru stared at him in complete confusion. Pet? He glanced at Shinobu, then looked back at Mendo. What are you talking about? We only just arrived in this world. Mendo laughed again. Yeah, sure. Before another word could be spoken, Commander Rei entered with several Oni soldiers at his side. Without saying a single word, he unlocked a massive iron door. The three prisoners were shoved inside. Clang! The heavy door slammed shut behind them, the deafening crash echoing through the stone corridor. Darkness swallowed almost the entire cell. Only a few pale moonbeams filtered through a tiny barred window high above. The air was damp, icy, and unforgiving. Shinobu shivered. Without saying anything, Ataru quietly removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Then he slipped an arm around her, trying to shield her from the bitter cold. Slowly, Shinobu rested her head against his shoulder. Nearby, Mendo stood silently beside the bars, staring out into the darkness. Some of his pride had returned. Don't worry, he said quietly. He kept his eyes fixed on the night outside. Glasses and the others will come for us. It's only a matter of time. Ataru let out a small chuckle. Wow, your attitude sure changed fast. Mendo spun around, offended. What is that supposed to mean? A little while ago, you were ready to sell out the entire resistance. Ataru folded his arms. And now you're acting like some noble hero. Mendo opened his mouth to fire back. But before he could speak, the heavy iron door groaned open once again. Commander Rei stepped inside, followed by 4 towering Oni soldiers. His gaze settled directly on Ataru. You. Ataru swallowed hard. Me? Rei gave a brief nod. Come with us. 2 Oni soldiers immediately seized Ataru by both arms. Hey, let go of me. Shinobu rushed toward him in panic, grabbing desperately onto one of his arms. No, tears streamed down her face. Please, don't hurt him. She looked up at Rei with pleading eyes. If someone has to go, take me instead. The soldiers gently but firmly pulled her away. Their strength was overwhelming. Mendo caught Shinobu before she could throw herself at them again. Calm down. He forced a confident smile. Everything's going to be fine. Glasses will get us out of here, and then we'll go rescue Ataru. Meanwhile, Ataru continued struggling helplessly in the soldier's grip. Hey, let me go! Where are you taking me? But against the overwhelming strength of the giant Oni warriors, there was nothing he could do. The door slowly closed behind him. Clang. The metallic echo rolled through the prison. Shinobu stood frozen, staring at the closed door with tear-filled eyes. Silence settled over the cell once more. Meanwhile, Ataru was being dragged through the endless corridors of the gigantic Oni fortress. 2 enormous soldiers held him tightly by the arms. Commander Rei walked ahead of them. His stride was calm, confident, and unhurried, never once glancing back. Ataru, on the other hand, could barely keep his footing. Hey, take it easy! Stop shoving me! I didn't do anything! The Oni soldiers remained completely expressionless. Ataru's feet began to drag across the floor. Tears welled up in his eyes. I don't want to die. They're gonna torture me. They're gonna chop me into tiny little pieces. His head drooped in defeat. And all because I kicked that stupid box. He let out a miserable sigh. Why does this always happen to me? The 2 Oni soldiers exchanged a quick glance. Then, without warning, they chuckled. Heh! Ataru turned even paler. You're laughing? At the end of the corridor stood a colossal metal door. With a deep mechanical hum, it slowly slid open. The soldiers shoved Ataru inside. He squeezed his eyes shut instinctively. He braced himself for chains, for torture devices, for a damp dungeon buried in darkness. Instead, when he cautiously opened his eyes, he froze. Stretching before him was an enormous grand hall, brilliantly illuminated by magnificent chandeliers. Rich crimson carpets covered the floor. The walls were decorated with elegant tapestries, royal banners, and finely carved wooden furnishings. It didn't resemble a prison in the slightest. It looked like the audience chamber of a royal palace. Standing in the center of the room, her back turned toward the entrance, was an imposing figure. A woman well over 2 meters tall. Her long jade green hair cascaded gracefully to her waist. She wore heavy military boots, reinforced leather armor lined with polished steel plates, sturdy combat bracers, and a flowing cape draped across her broad shoulders. An elegant helmet framed the unmistakable curved horns of an oni. It took only a single glance. Ataru recognized her instantly. The towering figure slowly turned around. Her expression was stern, regal, commanding. But the very instant her eyes met Ataru's, everything changed. Her eyes shimmered with tears. A radiant smile blossomed across her face. "Darling!" She burst forward at full speed. Ataru barely managed to lift one hand. "Hey!" The next instant, Lum swept him into her arms with overwhelming strength. "Darling! You're finally back!" The embrace was so crushing that every bit of air escaped Ataru's lungs. His feet lifted completely off the floor as his face disappeared against the invader's generous chest. His cheeks turned bright red while he desperately struggled to breathe. Lum continued crying with pure joy. "I searched everywhere for you. I thought those awful resistance people had captured you. I was so afraid. I thought I'd never see you again." She squeezed him even tighter. Ataru flailed both arms in panic. "I can't breathe." But Lum was far too overwhelmed by happiness to notice. Commander Ray watched the reunion with a faint, satisfied smile. "I knew it. It really was him." Lum gently cupped Ataru's face in both hands. Tears continued rolling down her cheeks as she smiled at him with boundless affection. "Thank you for bringing my darling back to me, Ray. I truly believed I'd lost him forever." Ataru struggled to catch his breath. He looked at Lum, then at Ray, then slowly glanced around the magnificent hall once more. None of this made any sense. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Oni fortress, darkness completely engulfed the ancient dungeon. The only light came from the small barred window, where a few lonely moonbeams struggled to pierce the thick iron bars. Shinobu and Shutaro Mendo sat against the cold stone wall, doing their best to keep warm. Mendo had given her part of his coat. For the first time in a long while, the arrogance that usually defined him had vanished. Only concern remained. Then, tap, tap. Both of them lifted their heads. The sound had come from the tiny window. Tap, tap. A shadow appeared beyond the bars. Shinobu cautiously stepped closer. "Who's there?" A familiar face emerged from the darkness. "Quick, it's me!" Mendo's eyes widened. "Glasses!" Standing outside the window were Glasses, Permanent, Chubby, and Gorilla. All four wore the combat uniforms of the Resistance. "Lord Mendo," Glasses whispered, "we've come to rescue you." A proud smile spread across Mendo's face. "I knew you'd come." Glasses immediately gestured to the others. No time to waste. Outside the cell, Permanent and Gorilla wrapped heavy steel chains around the iron bars. The chains were then fastened to a small cargo vehicle. "Everyone, stand back!" Shinobu and Mendo quickly moved away from the window. The engine roared to life. The chains tightened. Crack! The bars began to bend. The stone wall trembled. Then, boom! A massive section of the wall burst apart. Chunks of stone and clouds of dust exploded into the air, leaving a huge opening. Shinobu and Mendo climbed through the rubble. Looking nervously toward the prison corridors, Shinobu whispered, "Won't the guards hear that?" Glasses calmly adjusted his spectacles. "Don't worry." He looked back toward the fortress with a confident grin. "The Oni may be unbelievably strong, but they're just as unbelievably dense. As prison guards, they're not exactly impressive." Chubby nodded. "At this hour, they're probably eating," Gorilla shrugged, "or sleeping after eating." Glasses raised a hand. "We have to move. Now." Shinobu glanced back toward the fortress. "What about Ataru?" Silence fell over the group. Mendo slowly closed his eyes. "We're going back for him." Glasses nodded without hesitation. "Of course." Shinobu looked at him in surprise. "Really?" He answered with absolute conviction. "Lord Mendo never abandons his comrades." Mendo folded his arms proudly. "Besides," he deliberately looked away, "I refuse to let a lady like you worry over someone like him." A faint smile appeared on Shinobu's face. "Thank you." Without another word, the group disappeared into the darkness of the night. Meanwhile, somewhere inside the Oni Palace, Ataru was enduring an experience of an entirely different kind. "Darling, open wide." "No." Seated helplessly on the lap of the gigantic alternate universe Lum, Ataru struggled desperately to escape. It was hopeless. Lum's powerful arms held him with effortless strength. An enormous spoon slowly approached his face. "Come on, darling." You have to eat. You need to get your strength back. Ataru stared in horror at the mountain of food waiting on the plate before him. I'm perfectly fine. I don't need anyone feeding me. Lum smiled with endless tenderness. Yes, you do. Her eyes began to glisten once more. I've missed you so much. Ataru blinked in confusion. Lum gently stroked his hair. I had no idea where you were. We searched everywhere. I was terrified the resistance had done something to you. She hugged him tightly again. I was so afraid I'd never find you. For a brief moment, Ataru simply stared at her. He could see it now. The sadness in her eyes was real. Before he could think of anything to say, Lum smiled again. Now you're here with me, and I'm never letting you disappear again. Ataru's eyes flew open in horror. Huh? Lum cheerfully lifted the spoon once more. One more bite, okay? A little while later, Ataru wasn't exactly walking. He was being dragged. Lum calmly strolled down the palace corridor while holding him by one leg, as if hauling along a particularly stubborn kitten. Come on, darling. It's time for your bath. I can walk by myself. Let go of me. Ataru desperately clawed at the polished stone floor, trying to stop himself. It didn't help in the slightest. Lum continued forward without slowing down. At the end of the corridor, a pair of enormous doors slowly swung open. A cloud of warm steam billowed into the hallway. Inside lay a vast Japanese-style bathhouse, towering stone columns, expansive hot spring pools, thick white steam drifting lazily through the air. Ataru's eyes grew wide. No. No way. Lum smiled sweetly. It'll help you relax. The doors closed behind them. Outside, the Oni guards remained at their posts. A few seconds passed. Then, help! The guards exchanged puzzled glances. Moments later, they simply laughed. Sometime afterward, Ataru emerged from the bathhouse once again. He was now dressed in a clean set of pajamas. His face wore the expression of someone who had survived an experience beyond human understanding. Where are you taking me now? To bed, Lum answered happily. Ataru immediately took a step backward. No thanks. I'm not sleepy. Lum's smile only grew brighter. Don't worry. The last thing we'll do is sleep. Ataru's face drained of color. Help! Somebody help me! He spun around and tried to flee. Without the slightest effort, Lum grabbed him by the back of his pajama collar and calmly dragged him down the corridor. His legs kicked wildly through the air. Help! I'm being kidnapped! Lum cheerfully pulled him into an enormous bedroom. The door closed behind them. Clack! For a few seconds, silence. Then bang! The heavy door shook violently. A brilliant flash of blue lightning illuminated the hallway. Lum! Wait! Don't do that! Outside, the Oni guards exchanged nervous looks. The door trembled again. Another loud thud. Another desperate scream. More flashes of electricity burst beneath the doorway. Suddenly, bang! The door flew open. Ataru crawled out into the hallway. His eyes were wide open. His face was frozen in absolute terror. I just wanted to go home. Before he could crawl any farther, an invisible force yanked him backward. Wah! He vanished back into the room. No! Clack! The door shut once again. From inside, a soft, delighted giggle echoed through the room. The hallway lights flickered, then went dark. A moment later, they came back on. Everything had fallen perfectly quiet. Inside the bedroom, Lum slept peacefully across the enormous bed. A blissful smile rested upon her face. Cradled securely in her arms like a beloved stuffed animal was Ataru. Only his head remained visible above the blankets. His eyes were wide open. His expression belonged to a man who had somehow survived an impossible war. Still asleep, Lum smiled gently and whispered, "Darling." And the scene came to an end. Meanwhile, 3 days had passed. 3 very long days since Ataru had arrived in this strange reality. And during that time, he had uncovered a terrifying truth. The war against the invading Oni wasn't the greatest danger in this world. The true danger wasn't an alien invasion. The true danger was being loved far too passionately by a giant space Oni standing over 2 meters tall. The vast corridors of the Oni Palace lay wrapped in silence. Then, bang! A door burst open. Ataru Moriboshi came sprinting out at full speed. He was barefoot, wearing nothing but a towel wrapped around his waist. His hair was a complete mess. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. He looked like someone who had completely lost track of how long he'd been running. I can't do this anymore. I've got to get out of here. I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes of peace and quiet. Behind him, A towering figure walked calmly down the hallway. It was Lum. She was barefoot as well. Her long jade-green hair swayed gracefully with every step. Fresh from her bath, she wore only a white towel wrapped around her body. Unlike Ataru, she looked perfectly content. "Darling, wait!" Ataru glanced over his shoulder. The color instantly drained from his face. His frantic footsteps echoed rapidly against the stone floor. Behind him, each of Lum's footsteps sent a faint tremor through the corridor. Thump, 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 as though a gentle mountain were quietly closing the distance. Ataru pushed himself even harder. He rounded a corner, then came to an abrupt stop. His heart nearly stopped with him. The corridor ended in a solid stone wall. There was no exit, no doorway, no escape. He froze. No, it can't be. Slowly, he turned around. Lum continued walking toward him, wearing the same warm, affectionate smile. "Darling." Ataru raised both hands in surrender. Lum." She kept coming. He swallowed nervously. Lum finally stopped right in front of him. From Ataru's point of view, all he could see were her long, powerful legs as she stood over him. Then, the knot holding her towel loosened ever so slightly. The fabric began to slip. After several long days, Ataru finally found the courage to speak. For a few silent moments, he simply looked at Lum. She gazed back at him with a puzzled smile, expecting one of his usual jokes. But this time, he wasn't joking. "Lum, wait. There's something I have to tell you." Her expression softened. Tilting her head curiously, she smiled. "What is it, darling?" Ataru lowered his eyes. He didn't know how to begin. He had faced aliens, survived impossible situations, even endured the consequences of countless reckless decisions. Yet somehow, telling Lum the truth felt harder than any battle he'd ever fought. Finally, he drew a slow, steady breath. "I'm not the darling from this world." The words lingered in the air. Lum blinked. She didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Ataru met her eyes. "I know this sounds ridiculous, and you're probably thinking this is just another one of my crazy excuses. But the truth is, I'm not from here. I'm from another place, another world, another reality." Little by little, he told her everything, how he had arrived in this strange universe, how he had met the Lum of his own world, how his life had followed an entirely different path, and how, for reasons neither of them could possibly explain, he had somehow ended up standing before her. As Ataru spoke, Lum's expression slowly changed. At first she looked confused, then surprised. And little by little, that surprise gave way to sadness. The familiar sparkle in her eyes began to fade. The bright smile she always wore slowly disappeared. Ataru searched desperately for the right words, but every sentence only made things worse, because every memory he shared belonged to someone else, to another Lum, another story, another fate. A single tear rolled silently down her cheek. She tried to wipe it away before he could notice. She couldn't. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "So, the person I was waiting for, the darling I believed I'd find." She lowered her gaze. "Wasn't you?" A painful knot tightened in Ataru's throat. For the first time in a very long while, he didn't have a joke. He couldn't hide behind a laugh. He couldn't pretend everything was fine. He could only stand there, watching someone he had only just begun to know suffer because of a story that had never belonged to either of them. Lum brushed another tear from her cheek, trying to stay strong. Another one immediately followed. Ataru remained silent, because even if he wasn't the darling she'd been waiting for, he knew one thing for certain. He never wanted to become the one who broke her heart. At last, the day of the rescue arrived. Before the immense Oni fortress, the resistance assembled. Shinobu, Mendo, Glasses, Permanent, Chubby, Gorilla, and Ryunosuke. They had all come for one reason: to rescue their friends and find a way back home. Without wasting a second, they secured an explosive charge against one of the fortress's massive outer walls. Silence hung in the air. Then, BOOM! A tremendous explosion rocked the entire fortress. The wall shattered into countless fragments, leaving a gaping breach large enough for the resistance to storm through. But the moment they crossed the threshold, alarms blared throughout the fortress. Their piercing wails echoed through every corridor. Within seconds, hundreds of Oni soldiers poured in from every direction. The resistance found itself completely surrounded. Every weapon was raised. "Don't move." Then, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Stop." Every head turned. From the far end of the chamber, Lum appeared. Walking calmly beside her was Ataru. Something about him had changed. Dark circles framed his exhausted eyes. His hair was hopelessly disheveled. His face belonged to someone who hadn't enjoyed a full night's sleep in days. He looked utterly worn out. Lum slowly raised one hand. Stand down. The Oni soldiers hesitated. Confused murmurs spread through their ranks. No one understood what was happening. Lum turned toward the members of the resistance. Ataru explained everything. Then she looked at Shinobu. They aren't our enemies. She paused for a brief moment. They're simply people trying to return home. Little by little, the tension dissolved. The Oni lowered their weapons. For the first time in a long while, neither side looked at the other as enemies. Later, everyone gathered in the place where the old park had once stood. Nothing remained of it now. Only a vast, empty field. At its center rested the antimatter device. Lum worked with complete concentration. She unfolded electronic panels, checked every connection, adjusted one parameter after another. Her hands moved swiftly and confidently as she examined every detail. Finally, after several long minutes, she straightened up. It's ready. Silence settled over the group. With this, you'll be able to go home. Shinobu smiled with unmistakable relief. Thank you, Lum. Lum's eyes slowly drifted toward Ataru. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. At last, Lum broke the silence. I'm gonna miss you. Ataru lowered his eyes. I hope you find the Ataru who belongs to this world. A faint smile crossed his face. After everything that's happened, he looked at her warmly. I understand now just how much you love him. Shinobu quietly watched the two of them. There were still so many questions left unanswered. What exactly happened? Ataru let out a weary sigh. It's a very long story. Shinobu folded her arms. Then you can tell me on the way back. She fixed him with a serious look. And I expect every last detail. Ataru answered with an uneasy smile. Right. But then... Wait. Mendo's voice interrupted the conversation. Everyone turned toward him. The young heir frowned thoughtfully. You're looking for the Ataru of this reality. Lum nodded. I thought he disappeared. Mendo's eyes widened. Disappeared? He slowly shook his head. No. After a brief pause, he continued. He's in Nerima. And for the past several months, he's been living there with a girl named Sasami. Lum froze. In Nerima? Mendo answered matter-of-factly. That's right. The miserable coward ran away. A heavy silence fell over the field. Ataru's eyes widened. Ran away? Mendo nodded. He said he couldn't survive another day living under that much affection. Slowly, Lum's expression began to change. Tiny arcs of electricity crackled around her body. That? The sparks grew brighter. Womanizing idiot? Living with another girl? For months. In Nerima, the air itself began to vibrate. That scoundrel. Ataru instinctively took a cautious step backward. I've got a really bad feeling about this. Lum threw both arms into the air. I'm going to find him! Bolts of lightning exploded around her. And he's going to pay for this! A colossal electrical blast erupted in every direction. The ground shook violently. The antimatter device began flashing uncontrollably. Glasses rushed toward the controls. The frequency is rising. He frantically checked the readings. Everyone, get back! But it was already too late. Lum's electrical energy merged with the power of the device. A blinding light swallowed the entire area. Ataru barely had time to react. He grabbed Shinobu's hand. The two of them started running. But reality itself was already coming apart. The sky changed color. The earth fractured beneath their feet. Space twisted around them. Everything disappeared beneath an ocean of brilliant white light. And once again, Ataru Moriboshi was swept away into another reality. A completely different world. A world where nothing would turn out the way he expected.